Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. Long time away from the channel, but I am back for some CFL offseason content. Going to be doing some NFL stuff as well this month. So very excited to bring you that. In this video, we're going to be talking about the biggest offseason storyline for every CFL team. Free agency about a month away, and I'm going to be doing some more videos on that. Talking about team needs and whatnot, best free agents available, that kind of thing. But in this video, just talking about the major storyline I think is on tap for each team. And with that in mind, let's just get right into it, starting with the BC Lions. And I think the biggest offseason storyline for the BC Lions this offseason is simply how much of that core can they retain, because they brought in a ton of talented players last year because Nathan Rourke salary was so low. I think it was $70,000 a year. Average CFL quarterbacks making around $300K a year. So they saved so much on the quarterback position that they were able to bring in so many talented players that really aided them on the run to the Western Division Finals last year. So, I'm really interested to see if they lose some of those pieces now that they have to pay Vernon Adams presumably to be their starting quarterback if Nathan Rourke is going to be hanging around in the NFL in training camp. So very interested to see what happens. You already saw it with Lucas Purifoy being released, an early cap casualty for that team. So very interested to see what happens for the BC Lions going forward with that salary cap implications and whatnot. Now moving on to the Calgary Stampeders. And in my opinion, I think what really held Calgary's back the last couple of years, and last year in particular, is a lack of true upside on the offensive side of the ball. Can't really put a finger on it because on paper they have a very talented team, guys that have been stars in this league, but they just didn't live up to the potential that I think they had to win some of these big games last year. So I'm very interested to see what they do to bring in maybe a true difference-making receiver who, again, I thought they had that on the roster last year with Bagleton and Kamar Jordan, but clearly those two guys took a little bit of a step back last year. Kamar Jordan in particular, don't know if we'll see him back with the Stampeders. Bagleton is back because he signed an extension. I think that he is due for a big bounce back season next year, but I think that maybe they bring in another star receiver from around the league to really raise the upside of this team so they can compete with BC and Winnipeg at the top of the West Division. Very interested to see what Calgary does this offseason as a very consistently great team, but can they get over the hump and really compete for a Grey Cup next year? Now moving on to Calgary's provincial rival, the Edmonton Elks. And I think the questions revolving around this team this offseason revolve around their defense, which was downright embarrassing at points last season. Chris Jones is a defensive guy, so he's going to want to see that remedied. And I'm really interested to see how they go about fixing this defense that was, again, downright terrible at times last season. You started to see towards the back half of the season some of those core pieces really emerge. Enoch McConzo, their first-round pick from last year, looked pretty good, filling that strong side linebacker role for them. Scott Hutter at safety. So there are a couple pieces there that I think are noteworthy, but ultimately, I think at the end of the day, they're going to have to bring in some more difference-making players. I think Chris Jones is going to bring in some more veteran players, always known as a recruiting guy, back to his time with Edmonton, Saskatchewan. So very interested to see what they do to address the defensive needs that they have on that side of the ball. They've already brought in Lucas Purifoy, who is an early release from the BC Lions. I think that is a great addition, but I think they're going to need more on the defensive side to fix their issues. Now moving on to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and in my opinion, the biggest question that everybody's asking is what are they going to do at this quarterback position, because you have Cody Fajardo, who's been the starter for a couple of years now. What do you think he's going to be able to accomplish going forward? I think that the organization may have soured on him, but the question I have is there a better option out there, frankly? Because if you're not going to get Bo Levi Mitchell, assuming he signs in Hamilton or somewhere else, is there a better option that you can bring in to really upgrade that quarterback room over Cody Fajardo. So I'm very interested to see, is it a Dane Evans perhaps if Hamilton does sign Bo? Is it a Vernon Adams Jr. if BC decides to go in a different direction? I'm very interested to see what happens with the quarterback position in Saskatchewan. It's going to be a very much talked about aspect this offseason in the CFL. So very excited to see what Saskatchewan does. I think overall they still have a very talented team, very undisciplined, I think, as it's been well documented. But at the end of the day, I think that if they get the quarterback position right, clean up some of their issues, I think this team is right back in that Western Division playoff picture next season. Now moving on to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and they're coming off their first Grey Cup loss in the past few years after winning back-to-back championships. And my question for them is, do they restructure their team a little bit, try to get a bit younger in spots, or do they run it back and try to win their third championship in 4 years? I think that ultimately they're mostly going to run it back. You see guys like Stanley Bryan and I believe Adam Bighill already re-signing. So I think their intention is to keep that window open with the current group of guys. But do they make a major addition here? I think maybe they bring back Kenny Lawler in free agency if that is a feasible thing from a financial standpoint. Losing Dalton Schoen probably to the NFL hasn't been confirmed yet, but I assume he's going to be signing a futures deal down there. So very interested to see what happens with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers going into next season and this offseason. Now moving on to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and I think the obvious question here is, do they sign Bo Levi Mitchell, who they just traded for his rights a couple of months ago from the Calgary Stampeders? He would be the best quarterback available in free agency this coming offseason. And I'm very interested to see if they do in fact sign him. I'm sure they're working around the clock trying to get him to sign on the dotted line. I think it actually does make sense for both Bo and the team because he gets out of that West Division. I think playing in the East is, no disrespect, a lot easier, at least in the regular season. And I'm very interested to see if that is in fact the destination for Bo Levi Mitchell. If they don't sign Bo Levi, I am very interested to see what they do. Do they run it back with Dane Evans? I think anything's on the table if that happens, but I think the priority number one is getting Bo Levi Mitchell again to sign on that dotted line in Hamilton, because I think it would be a dramatic upgrade, at least to what we saw last year from Dane Evans, having a little bit more of a proven guy in there with Bo Levi, even though maybe he's a little bit over the hill. I think the Ticats are willing to gamble on that, given what we saw last year from the quarterback position. So we'll see what happens there, but obviously that is the big question in Hamilton. Now moving down the QEW to the Toronto Argonauts, another team that I think has questions at the quarterback position. I think that is the biggest storyline for this team this offseason. Do they go back and run it back with McLeod Bethel-Thompson, who's a lot older than you might think? I think he's like 34 years old or something like that. I believe he's actually older than Bo Levi Mitchell, believe it or not. Do they run it back with him, or do they go with Chad Kelly, who of course came off the bench, led them to the Grey Cup this past season? So very interested to see, do they go with the veteran? Do they go with the youngish quarterback? I think Kelly's like 28 or something like that. He's not exactly a spring chicken, but he is a guy that, hopefully he could be a good first-time starter in the CFL if they decide to go that route next season. Obviously has a lot of talent, former NFL draft pick. And I don't know what the Argonauts are going to do in this one. I think that generally speaking, looking at what the Lions did last year with the cheaper quarterback model, they could retain a lot more pieces, doing it that way. So would be really interesting to see what happens with the Argonauts quarterback position. Obviously, with the defending Grey Cup champions, going to be a big storyline for them. Now, second to last here with the Ottawa Redblacks, and I think the big question for me this offseason with them is, do they double down on what they did last offseason and be super aggressive in free agency? They tried aggressively to attack a lot of their needs and, make this team a lot more competitive this past season. But unfortunately, a lot of the same results. I think a lot due to the quarterback injury with Jeremiah Masoli. But remember, they were 0-4 when Masoli did go down. So should be very interested to see if they again try to be super aggressive, or do they just try to run it back with the same crew? Hopefully Mazzoli's back healthy. Apparently good reports on his health to be ready for the start of next season. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they decide to do, how aggressive they are, and if Sean Burke is going to be doing the same things that he was doing last offseason. If I had to say, I think they are going to try to maybe bring in a big name receiver. I think that is really what they could need on this receiving core and on this offense. Jalen Acklin's a really great player as well, but I think that they could really use a guy that really raises the upside of this offense on a week-to-week basis, and I'm excited to see what the Red Blacks do this offseason. And now for the final team of today's video with the Montreal Alouettes. And another thing that happened while I was away is that the Montreal Alouettes hired Jason Moss, former quarterback, as their head coach. And I'm very interested to see what happens with this team going forward under Moss, because he has a very unique offensive play calling style that I think some players have not fit his schemes in the past. You look at people criticizing him for his handling of Cody Fajardo last year or the last couple of years in Saskatchewan. So can he get players that fit his scheme? I think that is going to be really crucial for this team under Jason Moss going forward. And I think that is the big question and storyline with the Montreal Alouettes this offseason, now that Moss is now the head coach there in Montreal. And I think that, going forward, I think the Alouettes, they had a pretty good season this past year, but again, they're another team that I think needs to raise maybe the upside of their unit. Maybe it's as simple as having William Stanback be back for a full training camp, get his legs back underneath him. I think he was a little bit slow to, restart, when he got back from that injury, understandable last season. So very interested to see what the Alouettes do. Again, how aggressive are they? Similar to what I said about the Red Blacks. But again, I think with them, it's more about the fit of the players under Jason Moss going forward. But with that said, those are just my selections for the biggest storyline for every CFL team this offseason. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. And with that said, hope everyone has a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.